It's been absolutely fascinating, really appreciate the detail that you've shared with us. But to maybe wrap the discussion up and help summarise, I wonder if I can ask each of you just to, and Andy, in your last response, you did sort of give some very clear thoughts on the opportunities within the region, but I wonder if I could ask you just to sort of your concluding remarks to UK retailers perhaps looking at Asia and the ASEAN region in particular.
Yeah, I think, again, I hope I haven't scared people off. I think that if you're coming to the market, this whole idea of having a very clear thought out strategy, I think Lee, clearly his company have got one. I think that's their experiences in the Middle East will lend them getting involved here. It will be far easier. And that strategy, really, the bigger you are, the more scale you can bring to the region. If you're able to set up a Far East distribution centre, if you're able to talk about bringing in Australia and New Zealand into the equation, then I think Southeast Asia as a whole is a very, very attractive market in the short, medium and long term. I think British companies need to be involved in this region as opportunities in other regions like Europe may be drying up. I mean, just today, M&S, I think, announced they're closing 60-odd stores internationally. They're all wholly owned stores. Most of them are in Europe, Eastern Europe. Yeah. So I think the emphasis will then be, well, where are the other markets that we need to sort of address the balance with? I think Asia is the pivot. I think that's where everyone agrees that's where there's going to be more and more focus going forward. So I think you have to have an omni-channel. There's no getting away from it. You've got to have that approach when you come to the market. So how you're going to choose a partner. Again, Lee's actually spot on. It's got to be the right partner, but how are you going to work with that partner with an online presence? How's that online presence going to be formatted? I think you need to have the right product at the right price. I think the days clearly are long gone of the sort of luxury products in Hong Kong and Singapore. They're losing a lot of traction. I think the future for the medium term, certainly in this part of the world, is going to be basically more on mid-range, more affordable brands. So especially when you talk about, yes, there's 260 million people in Indonesia, but how many can afford a Gucci or a Coach bag? So I think that the markets that really have interest, or the market sounds interesting to get into, is that sort of mid-level market in particular. And I think probably that's about it from my side.
Thanks very much, Andy. Lee, if I can turn to you, what's your final thoughts?
Yeah, I think as far as the Asian region's concerned, I think for us it's almost a natural progression in terms of the way that our business is developing and internationally expanding. I think as well, the market itself just can't be ignored. You can't, and I don't want to necessarily group it all of the countries because they do have their individuality. But if you're looking at the whole region, whatever statistic it is that you quote, whether it's 10% of the world's population, one of the biggest middle classes in the world, if you group it together, a very young demographic, I think as a UK retailer looking to develop internationally, as a minimum, it's certainly a region that you need to take a very hard look at, and certainly that's exactly what we're going to be doing.
Yeah. And last word to you, Fred, and the role of the Department for International Trade.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we sort of talk to companies about, because we have generally a very light touch when we're talking about companies like M&Co. Professionals, they know what they're doing. Debenhams, professionals, they know what they're doing. But we deal with an awful lot of companies that may be new to some of these markets as well. And one of the things that we talk about is having a broader view. So if they were stepping into the market, that they need to consider at very early stages. If let's say they go to Singapore first, which many British companies have done, Singapore, Malaysia, but if they are looking at stepping into the region, they need to think a little bit wider, and they need to think about basics like trademarks, because they may choose to step into Singapore, they may choose to step into Malaysia, and 2 years down the track they come to step into Indonesia and find that somebody has registered their trademark in that country. It happens. We see it all the time. And therefore one has to take a fairly broad perspective. If you're looking at a market, you have to realise that once your brand gets exposure, and that's what is important, you have a brand, and that brand needs to be protected. So we talk about due diligence to people. And one final note, I always go back to basics when I talk to companies and what's going to make their model successful in the country. And the way I was taught it a long time ago by a very a man who knew much more about retail than me when I was a very young man. He said, you've got to have the right merchandise in the right place at the right time, in the right quantity and at the right price. And he likened it to somebody called Gordon Selfridge. And supposedly that remark was known as the 5 rights of Gordon Selfridge. And you know what? It still stands true today, whichever market you're in.
Well, thank you very much, Fred. So that concludes our discussion on this fascinating but really important topic of the international opportunities for UK retailing, but looking specifically at the ASEAN region. Hopefully what you've heard with this discussion is obviously not without challenges, as with any market anywhere around the world. But equally, there's some hugely exciting opportunities, and UK retail has a well-deserved name right around the world for having created some of the very best retail businesses and best brands, because this is a hugely competitive market. So I think it's hardly surprising that UK retail can travel and can look at some really tough markets and survive, and also sees the opportunities for in many other emerging markets. So I'd like to thank our panellists. It's been a great discussion. So Fred from representing Department for International Trade, Lee from M&Co, and from Kuala Lumpur, Andy Jackson. Thank you very much for joining us. I should give a plug to the World Retail Congress, which DIT is supporting again, which will take place next year in Dubai in April the 4th to the 6th, 2017. And everything you've heard here will be sort of expanded on, because international expansion is a hugely important part of what we discuss at the World Retail Congress. But from a more immediate point of view, if anything you've heard is of interest or you'd like to find out more, then certainly contact Fred Bassnett and his team at the DIT. And above all, I hope you've enjoyed listening to the discussion. Thank you for watching, and once again, thank you to our panellists. Thank you.